I don't think I do it.
Arsenal started like a house on fire. Signing number 2 for this new era. It's Judgment Day, people. Yeah! What did your boy tell you? It was never in doubt. Never in doubt. Don't believe in any love, I believe I'm self-made, yeah. Now then, people, and welcome back to the Just Joe Football Show. And I forgot to warn Ben before we went live for the scream. I get a lot of grief for it. And I forgot to warn you that watch out for the scream. It might hurt your ears. So sorry for that, Ben. Welcome. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. If the scream hurts the ears, then maybe the jumper hurts the eyes. But it was there in the graphic. So I thought that I would wear it either by popular or unpopular demand. But I'm good. And if we're still allowed to say it, a belated Happy New Year to everybody.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. I was going to mention it as well, that you've come as you are on the thumbnail as well. So thank you very much to doing that. You were at that was the Champions League, right? It was the Champions League final, was it? That was
the Champions League final, indeed.
Not bad at all. Well, listen, folks, today is a very special show. Obviously, we're joined by Transfer Supremo Ben Jacobs, has his ears close to the ground on a number of stories. So I asked if he would come on, and thankfully he gladly agreed. We're going to be talking a little bit around about investment in Leeds United, both real and fake. We're going to be talking about potential midfielders coming in, striker, and of course centre-back that's been linked, Portuguese centre-back that's been linked as well, that we're all aware of over the last 24 to 48 hours. So we will touch on that. But before we do, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, get your comments in, and of course hit that notification bell. So what I thought we would do first of all, Ben, if it's all right with you, obviously a story broke, I think it was last week now, about potential Qatari investment in Leeds United. We know that Leeds United are in league, I guess, with the 49ers, and I think a lot of us fully expected that to be done this summer. I know they have an obligation to take charge by January 2024, but then there was noise of potential Middle Eastern investment, and I know you specifically spoke on that subject when it was first announced that it potentially could have come from Qatar. Do you want to just give us an update on the current investment situation at Leeds?
Yeah, of course. So the situation perhaps more recently that linked Leeds to Qatar was maybe off the back of a story that I wrote relating to Tottenham and Qatar Sports Investments, who are the parent company and owners of PSG, are looking for an ambitious 2023. And that will include minority investment within a Premier League club if they can pull it off. They want 2 in Europe. And then in addition, they've got Braga already, and they'll try and get a club in South America as well. And unlike the City Football Group, QSI don't really have a large model. They've been very PSG centric. Post World Cup, they're going to start to invest strategically, less so really to be too hands-on the football side, and more to try and get a return. And therefore, from the perspective of Daniel Levy, a partner with a lot of money that doesn't really want to change the dynamic of the football club could be very appealing. But those talks with Tottenham, as I exclusively reported via CBS, who I work for, are formative. And then I think that in a series of briefings, others heard about Premier League ambition and Leeds got linked. But we have to be very clear here that QSI haven't held any active talks with Leeds United. And obviously Leeds, as we can come on to in a moment, have got a different path around that transition of ownership to the 49ers, which is likely to be at the end of this season, but as you rightly alluded to, by the latest in January 2024. So naturally, because Leeds have had certain ties with Qatari companies in the past, and because Nasser Al-Khelaifi is very friendly with the Leeds hierarchy, and he's not only the president of PSG, but he's also the chairman of QSI as well, maybe 2 and 2 was put together. But I think that Leeds' strategy is to complete that acquisition fully to the 49ers and not to take on board a strategic partner. QSI would be looking for a stake of anything between 15 at the lowest and 30 at the highest. And they're trying to work out what level of football club is right for that. And as I said before, it's not just about picking a club at value. It's also about finding a fit because they don't necessarily want to manage in a day-to-day sense or have too much of an operational control. Even if they're the minority owner, they want to make money off a project. And Leeds is not the right profile in that respect, because what you inherit is this phenomenal brand, but already with a strategy in terms of its ownership. And what you obviously don't get compared to, for example, Tottenham, is a modern stadium. And in addition to that, the kind of facilities on the side that can help you grow your brand. And if you're looking at it only in terms of revenue, and you're the minority owner, and you're looking to take a cut from the business without necessarily doing that much day-to-day management, then the clubs that QSI will invest in are ones that are floating on the stock market, where they can get a spike instantly from that investment. And we see that with Braga. If you look online at the Braga prices now compared to when QSI announced their investment, and they've got a decent chunk of Braga somewhere in the region of 23%, price has already gone up. So they've done nothing, and they've already managed to make some money off that without having to worry about form, without having to worry about development. They've put their money down and it's business as usual. And I think at Spurs, there's a feeling that if anything progresses, it's the same, because Daniel Levy doesn't necessarily want wholesale change in how the club is managed, whereas maybe Joe Lewis has got other ideas, which is why Tottenham are exploring privately, secretly, and talking to a variety of partners, and QSI are one of them. No talks though with Leeds United. And then as regards where Leeds are heading, it's no real secret, and hasn't been for a while, I would say, that the 49ers want to complete the sale. And they've got a contractual ability to do it later, but it's heading in the direction of sooner. And for a long time now, 49ers enterprises have been working not just on their strategy to increase their percentage at Leeds United from the original 10%, I believe it was when they first came in, but also the ropes of the football club. And this is a try before you buy approach. And when they see that Leeds are heading in the right direction, and when they realize the potential due to the fan base, and also all of those margins that I've just mentioned that Spurs have already got, but Leeds can still develop. So if they stay stable in the Premier League, and naturally, if they bring in more revenue, they can start thinking about all the things that aren't football in terms of how they develop. And when you get these American-led companies with a franchise-led mentality, and Todd Boehly at Chelsea is a good example of that, like Boehly or loathe Boehly, caricature Boehly or think he's got a clear plan, discount the money and the spending now, because that's the bit that everyone's fixated on. But Todd Boehly, away from the football, is thinking about the brand. So global growth, better sponsorship partners. Chelsea haven't always found the right ones. More economical use of squad in terms of lowering the wage bill and getting longevity from young players. And then thinking of new ideas, non-football income, for example, could be one of them. And the 49ers, as I understand it, have looked at the Leeds culture, and it's been very important to them to understand the fabric of the football club and the city, and that connection between city and fans and football club, which means that when they come in, they will understand the heritage of the football club and the culture, which is really important, because the last thing you want is a brand new owner saying, well, actually, I am now in favor of a Super League, or I want to move stadiums without consulting anybody. It can be a bit bullish. And I think that's where Boehly's divided opinion, because they've been in 6 months and there's been a lot of change at board level, at recruitment level, at medical level. The 49ers have very much waited and watched and learnt and increased investment. And now they are expected to get this done by the end of the season, or at the end of the season. And the caveat, which I'm sure people watching will ask, is around whether or not Leeds go down, it changes anything. And my understanding is no, not to a degree. So even though the 49ers are in, they're still doing a business transaction. And therefore, when they complete a sale, they will value the football club. And that valuation, as part of any due diligence, can go up or down based upon a variety of circumstances. And one of them, quite clearly, is what division you're playing in. So that will be a factor and a complication within the back and forth between the various parties. But the commitment remains to complete the sale, regardless of whether Leeds are in the Premier League or the Championship next season.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that as well with the structuring of the Jorginho Rutter deal. I think the 49ers were heavily involved in that deal, and I think that's obviously them banking on the club still being in the Premier League and therefore saying, right, okay, we'll be willing to put this money forward. Now, a lot of Leeds fans before the window were sceptical over whether we'd get any deals done. There was always a left back and a striker, and we seem to have completed them now with Vorber coming in, and of course Rutter from Hoffenheim. The next position that I believe Leeds United are looking at, Ben, is around the centre midfield area, or certainly in the centre of the park. Now, over the last 24 to 48 hours, there's been a few new fresh faces, if you like, that have been linked in that role. One that's been linked since the World Cup, and we'll touch on Ounahi towards the end. But there's been a couple of names over the last 24 to 48 hours. So I just wanted to put them to you and what you thought about these links and if indeed they are credible. We'll start with Morten Hjulmand, plays over in Italy, I believe, at Leeds, is it?
Lecce.
There you go. Pronunciation from me is not my strong point.
So the challenge here is fee, plain and simple, that Lecce are valuing him at somewhere close to 20 million. And Leeds are quite late in terms of expressing an interest. So they can't be seen as a front runner here by any stretch of the imagination. But what we're seeing is Leeds spinning plates late in the window. And I think that fans will be relatively pleased by that because, as you say, they've brought in two already. And the fact that they're still active in the market shows you that there's that real commitment to have a relatively healthy January. And we should preface before we go into any of these names that January is a seller's market, not a buyer's market. And on top of that, it's traditionally quiet. And maybe because we're off the back of a World Cup and due to the fact that Chelsea are spending and Arsenal were in a mad rush in some respects as well before Chelsea beat them to Mudryk to maybe get him or Felix. And in addition to that, they've brought in Trossard as well. And today we've seen a flurry of movement as well with one or two players that Leeds have looked at in the past. Danny Ings, for example, is a good example of that. And he's going to be off to West Ham United. So all of this movement is maybe creating a false perception that it's a mad window. And actually, it wouldn't surprise me if the last 2 weeks are a little bit underwhelming. But with Hjulmand, the issue is the interest came originally from Nottingham Forest and from Leicester, and then a little bit later down the line, but very credibly from Southampton. And Southampton are the club that have made the most advanced approach so far. Their initial valuation was, as I understand it, 8.5 million, and they were told that they'd have to fork over double that. And Nathan Jones does want to get something done, and there's a real feeling that Southampton are thin on the ground. And also, even though they have tried to prioritize younger players, and Joe Shields, who's now left, who was in charge of their recruitment last window, went really, really young. Lavia came in, Bazunu came in, and even with Hjulmand, he's only, I think, 23 years of age. So you can't exactly call him experienced, but there is a maturity about his game, and that's what's attracted both Leeds and Southampton as well. But I think it's going to be a fee of somewhere close to 20 million. And in addition to that, the payment terms are not particularly preferable either. So Lecce have come out and basically said that they don't see themselves in this January as a selling club. And therefore, it's not a case of a player's head being turned by a Premier League club. It's actually the reality that unless they get some fee considered to be above market value, there'll be no movement. So I think that Leeds' interest is going to come from perhaps the fact that they want to fill that sort of click-like void. And if you compare the two players, there are some similarities in terms of style. So Hjulmand is a tough tackling ball winner. He is aggressive, but it's sort of cautious aggression. He's certainly not impetuous or careless. His passing's quite direct. I think that he's not as aware in his peripherals or when running backwards about stifling counterattacks or clever movement around. So that awareness and that selflessness still needs to develop in his game. But he's a hardworking player and he offers a lot of qualities that will take quite well to Premier League football. But we can't call Leeds front runners here because they've already spent within this window, and the valuation, especially considering how long is left on the contract, is not, as I understand it, something that Leeds at this stage are particularly keen to meet. So two things are going to happen. Either one, Southampton in particular are going to return and match the valuation because a bit of a bidding war might take place. And we can't rule out Leicester as well, but they don't have a ton of money, but they certainly like the player. Or Leeds are going to realise that of the targets that they're chasing, there's probably other options that are more realistic at market value, and they're going to back out of this race. And then when we get towards the end of the window, it might turn, because that's what maybe fans don't realise, that right now, I always get asked as a journalist, what's the update? Why isn't there another update? Why isn't there any progress? And tactically, waiting is progress, because when you're trying to get a fee down and you sense from the way the market's moving that maybe no one will pay the fee or nothing has been agreed, sometimes you choose to wait and put the club in a position where you feel they're going to sell, and you might have to leave it a little bit later to make them sweat a little bit because that valuation hasn't had any takers. And then you come back in if you're the only credible suitor with a lower bid, and with a lack of time and the player wanting the move, you get the business done on your terms. And that's always the balance, because if you wait, someone can beat you to it. But if nobody beats you to it, you get a better possible deal. And that's where you use intermediaries and you get a sense of player buy-in and the market. In this case, there's no real indication that Leeds are front runners, but it's still one to watch, because if there's no movement in the market in the next few days, that's good news for Leeds. And then if they still have that funds and desire, they might return to the table with some kind of credible bid. So one to watch, but I certainly wouldn't get overexcited about it.
No. And you make a great point there, because I remember when we signed Rafinha just on deadline day a couple of seasons ago, and that one just came out of the blue, and we picked him up for 17 million, you know what I mean? So you can, if you wait, like you say, get him at a much better price. Now, another one, I've seen this link today, and he's been linked with a host of clubs, not least Tottenham, who are way ahead of Leeds United, obviously, in the hierarchy, is Roma midfielder Nicolo Zaniolo. I read this, and naturally Leeds fans got excited, but surely he's a little bit out of Leeds United's reach.
Not necessarily financially. I mean, the valuation on Zaniolo has dropped to somewhere between 30 and 35 million, which might seem like a large outlay, but he's a risk-reward type signing with a huge amount of potential. And then there's a feeling at the Roma end that they might be open to a loan with either an option or an obligation to buy, which allows you to bring somebody in and then deal with the situation based upon how he fares in the Premier League, at least if it's an option to buy. But as you rightly say, Spurs at the moment are the ones that are more seriously at the table. And the reason for that is because Antonio Conte has looked at Zaniolo for quite some time. And when Tottenham played Roma in a friendly over the summer, they began talks, but the price was too high. And at that point, Jose Mourinho was the roadblock, because he said that he didn't want Zaniolo to leave Roma. Now there's been a real breakdown, and Zaniolo has been a little bit inconsistent. And long before all of these problems, he also had a number of injury problems, some potentially chronic and others just very unlucky. But the talent is there. So this is what Spurs see and believe under the right manager they can develop. And that's why they're trying to get something done. Leeds like the player. Remains to be seen whether they would meet the valuation at 35 million. And the problem when you go up against Tottenham is that he's looking at two options, where one might be a team that goes down and the other might be a team that makes Champions League football. And yes, that's an extreme in the sense that right now it's probably more likely that Leeds will stay up and Tottenham won't make Champions League football. But players don't look at that mid-season. They say, if I join Spurs, my wages might be higher. I could get Champions League football. And if I end up joining Leeds, what will happen if I go down in the Championship? But that's where obviously a loan gives you a little bit of flexibility, because the player would probably insert a clause saying that he goes back to Roma if Leeds go down, or Leeds may say they have no obligation to buy if they go down, which is what Nottingham Forest have just done with Chris Wood from Newcastle United. It's a loan with, in theory, an obligation to buy, but it will be contingent upon Nottingham Forest staying in the Premier League. So again, without sounding negative, this is one that Tottenham are leading on, not just now, but they have been for quite some time. And Zaniolo is a player I actually know very well. A little side story. I was a consultant for Roma, living near Trigoria, which is in the middle of nowhere, way out from the center of Rome in the sort of rural area. And during that sort of 6 months or so, I was in one of these serviced apartment blocks where they put me up, and Zaniolo was my next door neighbor, and he was injured during that time. And he's very good at FIFA. That's the first thing I can tell you. Really ambitious. But I think the other thing is people will look at Zaniolo now and wonder where the fit is. And I think that's the big pitch about who gets Zaniolo, because if you judge the qualities now, you would either call him a winger, an attacking midfielder, or a forward, depending on where he's utilized. And he can be very dynamic and explosive, but he can also be very selfish and inconsistent with his finishing. And this season at Roma, I think it's only 13 games in Serie A and 1 goal. And last season, 28 games in Serie A off the top of my head. I think he only scored twice. But if we go all the way back to 1920, which was right when I was coming into Roma, he scored 6 goals in Serie A and 8 in all competitions. And that tells you, depending on where he's played, depending on how streaky he is and the freedom that he's given, the more goals he can score. But we have to be clear here on what kind of player you're inheriting, because he can be used more as an assister. He can be used more to make the pitch as big as possible, or he can be allowed to play more centrally in a false 9, in a forward type position. And then you might get goals out of him. But if it becomes about bringing in a player to score goals, that's not something that Leeds United or Spurs will be inheriting. And this is what I come back to when I refer to the pitch, that Antonio Conte doesn't see Zaniolo as only a winger or a forward. He believes that he could be an inverted fullback. He believes that the value is actually in converting him to a more defensive-minded player. So I don't know what Jesse Marsch's take is if Leeds were successful, but I think that if Spurs move and agree anything, it's going to be very difficult for Leeds to influence the situation.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that they've looked at Zaniolo before. Obviously, Matt Hayes, who's a friend of mine, has mentioned him on a number of occasions. And I know you did a video on with the Tottenham fans on that. But I think the main one that Leeds United have continuously been linked to is the Moroccan standout Azzedine Ounahi, currently at Angers. There's a host of Premier League clubs, I think, looking at his signature. But it seems to me, anyway, from what I read, Ben, that Leeds are maybe the front runners with that. And this is the one that I think, again, I don't know, but I'm the most positive about when it comes to that midfield role, Azzedine Ounahi.
I mean, if Leeds pull off Ounahi, it will be a flagship signing. Yeah. And he was stunning at the World Cup, one of the best midfielders. I've still actually not seen the World Cup team at the tournament, but I would be surprised if he wasn't in it. And naturally, there is interest, and Angers are not having a good season, and the player would like a move somewhere. So there's a real opportunity in the last days of the window, but it is about, to some extent, getting player buy-in. And Leeds have got history with Ounahi. Let's not forget, they've had the opportunity historically to sign him before for less than £10 million, and they didn't move. Now the price is not crazy high, but it's still significantly higher than back then. And you will see a lot of different numbers quoted, ranging from at the lowest end 20 million to at the highest end 35 million. I think that we'll see a final price landing somewhere in the high 20s, but some of it is also going to be about Angers getting a preferential payment structure and very gettable add-ons. And as a consequence, we have to be very clear that it's not only the number, but the structure. And I say that constantly during the window like a broken record. And it's exactly the same with Mudryk to Chelsea rather than to Arsenal. People said, wasn't it almost the same bid? And if you only look at the number, yes. But the add-ons that Chelsea were offering were more gettable because the contract's 8.5 years. And if Chelsea win the Premier League or the Champions League, then ultimately Shakhtar get paid. And over almost a decade, if history is anything to go by, Chelsea will win one of the two. Whereas Arsenal didn't bend on things like that. And then often a club like Angers, especially because they could easily go down, will want a lump sum up front, either to move in the market and get a replacement, or in addition to that, because they realise that their finances are going to take a hit. They're bottom, I believe, at the moment of Ligue 1 and increasingly stranded there. They've only won 2 games all season. So it's the right time for Ounahi to move. And that definitely gives Leeds confidence. And my understanding is he's also spoken directly to Jesse Marsch about his role, about the team, about a plan if Leeds themselves were to go down. And that's the only thing that might go through the player's mind in terms of if he joins now and Leeds get relegated, then he's gone from one relegation scrap to another. But the advantage Leeds have got here, categorically over any rivals, is that at the moment, the Premier League clubs that had been interested in the past have faded a little bit because of the price, particularly Leicester, who put down an early verbal offer and were told relatively quickly that it wasn't the type of move that the player was looking for. And some of that's games because it's very early in the window and a lot of other clubs were circling and he didn't just want to jump and move to Leicester. And then there's West Ham, who have looked at the player but haven't proceeded and have got other targets in mind. I wouldn't say that they're entirely out of the race. We have to be very careful about predictions because clubs U-turn all the time this late in the window because now they have to pick an A target. And if they don't get that A target, they go, well, okay, we're going to revisit something. But Leeds are the most serious at the moment from the Premier League clubs. Even Spurs, by the way, have looked at him to a lesser degree. And it's normal because you're scouting him before the World Cup and then he shows what he can do on the main stage. The advantage that Leeds have got, coming back to what I was saying, is just that Onguer desperately, because of their financial situation and because of their league position, want to sell to a Premier League club because that's where the offers are coming from. That's where the incentive is coming from. That's where they think is the opportunity within the market. At the player end, it's a slightly different story. And herein lies the challenge because Napoli are in the mix and for a short period of time, Atleti were in the mix. And as you can imagine, when it's pitched to a player like that off the back of the World Cup, you can go to Napoli flying in Serie A, Champions League football already virtually guaranteed for next season, or alternatively Atleti, who have that tradition of always really being in the Champions League as well. Then you again compare Leeds United and there's less stability there because there's not that evidence mid-season yet, mathematically or in terms of progress, that they'll definitely stay up. So this is why Jesse Marsch held the conversation with the player. And we have to wait and see because as far as Napoli have been concerned, they've not matched anything yet to date at the Onguer's end, and Atleti haven't advanced their interest to any serious degree. And this is what I said before about rather than trying to fixate on a front runner, it's more important to understand that the last few days of the January transfer window have unpredictable movement because some clubs know they're going to move but haven't shown their cards yet. And other clubs take a profile and use it as a yardstick to get their first choice. And this is the confusion, by the way, as a journalist sometimes, that a club will inquire about a completely random player like Chelsea the other day made a call about Scott McTominay, who they've got no intention to sign, but you do it to get a valuation in the market because you're going to offset that against an actual target you want that you're trying to keep under the radar. So we do have to be very careful, but Leeds are the most aggressive at the moment, and Leeds are the most likely from the Premier League to meet Onguer's valuation. And Onguer's preference, even though they're not the only deciding factor in all of this, is to try and sell to a Premier League club. But I still think we have to point out that Napoli may be there and one or two others could creep out of the woodwork, which is why the role of Jesse Marsch in pitching the project and the speed at which Leeds, if they progress, can agree a deal is going to be important. Because I think if this one drags on towards the final days of the window, that's when Leeds might go from, let's just call them for the sake of it, front runners, to a little further back in the race.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. There was absolutely loads. In then, Ben, and myself, and I know the viewers will be learning a lot as well. I didn't know about Chelsea just pipping out there for Scott McTominay and stuff. So that's mad. That is mad. Hopefully, Azzedine Ounahi does come to Leeds United. Because like you say, I think it'd be a real coup for us to be able to get that done. But like you say, we've seen before. I always remember like Tottenham being close to sign players, and then all of a sudden Liverpool just just shoot in there. And like you say, Leeds could be close to a deal for Ounahi, but if someone like a Spurs or something has looked at him, then they could just nip in last minute. So I guess, like you say, something to be wary of. Now, we did just speak just briefly off air. Obviously, they were the three main targets that I wanted to discuss with you this evening, but we did have a chat off air, and you mentioned the striker. Now, it's not someone I'm big on, and I've always been a bit unsure on this person, but it's Brereton Diaz you wanted to speak about. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, there's nothing hugely exciting at the moment because the players decided to stay at Blackburn and they're doing well at the moment in the Championship. But I think the point to make is that this was a player creeping onto Leeds' radar in terms of providing alleviation, cover, or even potentially replacement for Patrick Bamford. And Leeds very much liked the profile and felt that he was gettable over the summer, but weren't able to, verbally speaking, agree anything. And now we're in a situation where a mid-season move is not really within either Blackburn or Brereton Diaz's thinking. And Leeds over the summer were quite frustrated by the situation, unfortunately. And now we are in a scenario where we have outside interest coming in from Villarreal, and it looks like Brereton Diaz might well be going there, which changes what he told to Leeds towards the beginning of the window and last summer, which is that he was not interested in going anywhere mid-season. So this is going to be significant because if he moves, that would still be pre-agreed, as I understand it anyway, unless anything changes in the next 24 hours for the summer. But they want to lock that in now. So is there an opportunity, knowing that, from Leeds' perspective, to try and hijack that? Because the player was originally relatively keen on the Leeds project. He just felt like the timing was wrong and believed that starting the season with Blackburn and the form that he was in was going to be better. And now we're in a situation where he wants to see out the season if he can, but there's actually another suitor in Villarreal that are coming to the table and getting extremely close, from what I understand, to actually get a deal done. So maybe, and this is what I mean about not getting overexcited, because Leeds are not driving this one. This would be very reactive. Are Leeds going to say, we're aware that that's almost done, we're going to try our luck again, because they did have some player buy-in, or is that now a lost deal? And I think it is probably heading towards the latter, but I just wanted to flag that because even though it may not be done in terms of a move away from Blackburn until the summer, there could be a pre-agreement already very, very close. And if that transpires, how will Leeds react to that? And often you try a hijack, even though you know it's done with another club, just to test the market. And this is what I was saying before about how clubs work, that if you're using an intermediary or if you've got enough resource, you want to know what that deal is. You want to know what the price was, because that helps with your market intel. And a lot of clubs spend as much time, believe it or not, in a transfer window, outside of a transfer window, actually trying hard to work out where their rivals are moving, because that's how you really get a notion of who's spending what. And then one day you're going to go up against them, or you're going to return to that player or club, and you've got more intel because you're casting your net wider, because you're looking at what all of your rivals are doing as well. So actually, as a journalist, believe it or not, some of the best info you get and some of the most stood up info you get from multiple sources, it doesn't just come from a buyer, a seller, a player and an agent. It might come from a rival club that are well aware of what others in the market are doing. For example, Chelsea are spending so big and ambitiously that there's other clubs, as we saw with Arsenal and Mudryk, that are not able to get the same target because Chelsea have beaten them to it. And they have a sense of what they were going to pay and what Chelsea have paid and what the discrepancy is. And that, again, helps define the market and the direction in which it's moving. So this is very interesting. We're going to see it with Moises Caicedo for sure as well, who may well not leave Brighton during this January window because Brighton's valuation is sky high. But other clubs like Newcastle and Liverpool have thought about Caicedo around the 50 million mark. And Chelsea are bidding upwards of 55 million plus add-ons, which is a good 10 or 15 million more than their rivals. So those rivals then need to turn to other targets, because as soon as Chelsea bid, even if they're not successful, that becomes the yardstick. And this was the challenge over the summer with Brereton Diaz, that those inquiring had a higher valuation originally than Leeds. And then when Leeds came in, there was some interest in the project, but Blackburn persuaded the player to stay and stick with their project. And now again, Leeds are in a position as a Premier League club where they might be able to outbid a club who are outside of the Premier League, but the player might be sold on a different move. So they may inquire and call. It's one to watch. But I just think his movement, whether it is in January or the summer, but pre-agreed, is really interesting. And if Leeds have the opportunity to influence that, I'm not saying it will be priority, but certainly one to watch over the coming weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe the re-emergence of Patrick Bamford, obviously back from injury, getting back amongst the goals, if he can maintain his fitness, then maybe, like you say, they will say, right, okay, Ben, you go to Villarreal if that's what you opt for. And just to finish with as well, obviously, there's been a lot of noise over the last 24 to 48 hours about Diego Monteiro, Portuguese centre-back. He was initially unnamed and everyone was looking at young players over in Portugal, but it turns out he is Portuguese, but he doesn't play in Portugal. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, he is over with Servette in Switzerland, one of the top flight teams over there. And Leeds, at least the last time I checked, was still lining up a bid, but they're very keen on getting this one done. He's a Portuguese centre-back, very promising, very modern defender, good movement off the ball, and in a back four, can play in a back three as well. And he will only actually turn 18, I think, towards the end of the window in the last few days. So he adds a lot for the future. And not only that, but he's quite a mature player. So I don't think we're talking about somebody that would be thrown straight in, and therefore it would be interesting to see if Leeds are successful, exactly what they do with him in the short term. But he's won caps for Portugal at youth level. And like I said before, very much known as a modern defender. He's composed. He wins his fair share of aerial duels. He's not afraid to play out from the back. And I think that makes Leeds feel that there's real value in moving now, because he falls into that category of modern defenders that if you wait a year or two, not only will there be a whole lot more demand, but the price will be a whole lot higher. So paying now, and I'm not entirely aware what the exact bid is going to be, will still be seen to be quite expensive for a teenager. Mm-hmm. But it's that balance again between paying what is ultimately a small fee but big for a player of that age, or paying a more valuable fee later down the line that is still higher than you pay now. And if you get him now, you know you've paid a bit more, but a bit more still might only be $1 million or $2 million. And in football terms, that's not that much. And if he succeeds, by the time he's 20, 21, you've got a real bargain that you can either develop in your side or sell on at a big profit. And that's why, obviously, clubs want to invest in youth players now if they possibly can. So I think this is one to watch. I think Servette are accepting the fact that they will lose the player. Whether or not they want to do that mid-season rather than the summer still remains to be seen. A lot will depend on the bid and the structure as well. They'll no doubt want a sell-on clause too, because he's young. And if Leeds end up selling him to another club one day, or it doesn't work out, but they still make a profit off him, then Servette will be very keen to get that sell-on percentage. And again, that comes back to the fee, that if, and I'm only giving examples here, they're not necessarily accurate to the player, but if you paid $5 million for a 17-year-old, which is still quite a lot of money for a player that age, and you sold him for $20 million, and there was a 15 or 20% sell-on clause, then if it's 20%, the club that sell him get $4 million back, and they've got $5 million transfer fees. So they've doubled up using that approach. And from Leeds' point of view, they've still made either a healthy profit, or if they don't sell, they get longevity out of him. So this is the sort of advantage, very much one for the future, little bit raw in terms of perhaps how he approaches, I think, situations where he's pulled out of position in particular. So I really like him on the ball. I really like him in different formations. He's fast. He wins aerial duels, and he's reasonably aware of what's around him going forwards. But if, for example, another centre-back or defender gets pulled out of position, or if he has to cover a position that isn't his primary area of speciality, or if he's just asked to switch somewhere during a corner, go and cover the left post and then get back, that's when he can be a bit stagnant. That's when he can be a bit caught out, especially when things happen at pace. And obviously the Premier League is one of the fastest leagues in the world. So that's not a criticism in the sense that the speed of thought is just developed over time with maturity. And I think, therefore, clubs are less worried about it. They want the profile. They want the right physical footballer. They want the right level of aggression. They want a good first touch. They want somebody that is not afraid to get stuck in. They want someone that can win a second ball, and they want somebody that is controlled on the ball, perhaps when they're under pressure. And if, for example, you get someone in an unnatural position because of a game circumstance, and then they're not getting back, or they're not aware that they have to move from a normal and natural position to an unnatural position because of the danger in front of them, that's the kind of thing that comes down to speed of thought. And when you've got speed of movement and when you've got technique, the speed of thought can be taught to somebody that young, and they can learn very quickly. And this ultimately is why there's room for improvement, and why a fee paid now could prove very valuable. So we have to wait and see what Leeds' bid is, but they're very much in the race here to try and get something done.
Yeah, and we've had success of late of obviously players. You just have to look at Willy and Gnonto to see that. I know you've got a shoot in a second, Ben. I just wanted to ask you, obviously there was a lot of noise that Leeds United were potentially looking at Jesse Marsch replacements. Do you know anything about that at all?
No, I mean, you got to bear in mind that the decision on Jesse Marsch is not only from the current regime, because if 49ers Enterprises are coming in, they'll have their own take about the stability of the football club. And nobody wants to change mid-season unless things get really, really dire. So we're going to have to wait and see on this. As you would expect, officially and even off record at Leeds, the support is still for Jesse Marsch. There's no dreaded vote of confidence yet. No. And Marsch has kind of teetered on the edge, and at times he's got wins at the right time. I think back to Liverpool at Anfield, for example. And I think right now, the current owners and the incoming full owners, if everything goes according to plan in 49ers Enterprises, like the passion, they like the strategy, and they feel like Jesse Marsch can be the person to lead this project. But football is ultimately results driven. So we know if Leeds go on a run of like 5 straight defeats and hit close to rock bottom of the table, things will be very different. I don't think they're actively looking. There's people out in the market at the moment like Mauricio Pochettino, Sean Dyche, Thomas Tuchel. Not all of them would necessarily be up for the Leeds type of job, not mid-season anyway. And that's where Marsch really might get, I don't want to say misled, but we have to think about, if 49ers Enterprises come in and Leeds stay up, does that automatically mean that they'll stick with Marsch if they've not seen enough evidence from this season that he's the right person from the job? And officially the answer is yes, which is why, to quote Marsch, he said that this notion of a lack of support anywhere at the football club, this idea of dressing room unrest, is, quote, BS. So if we take him at his word, then he's safe, he's confident, he's bullish about the situation, he hopes to keep Leeds up, and should that happen, then he can put all of these rumours behind him. But we also have to think about a new ownership group as potentially, if things stabilise and they start with a blank slate in the Premier League, maybe having other ideas based upon opportunism, based upon who's available in the market. And I have no intel at this point if that's the case, but that is a key factor in all of this. When any new owner comes in, even if they've already been incumbent in a minority sense at the football club, they can have new ideas. But I don't think that Marsch is sort of hanging by a thread at the moment in terms of being hours or days or one bad result away from being sacked. I think in the build-up to the World Cup, that was potentially the case. Things picked up, then they went back in the other direction, and now we're sort of seeing a very mixed bag. But when you see a football club mid-window invest in the manager like Leeds are doing in terms of their spending and try for players, even if they don't come off, the fact that they're putting offers down shows you that there is a backing for Marsch. And perhaps unlike Chelsea and perhaps like one or two other clubs where the hierarchies are more driving the transfers, Marsch is getting a big say. And you don't give him that big say, whether you succeed or fail, unless you still think he's going to be around for at least the next few months or until the end of the season. So I think he'll see out the season. I hope he sees out the season, but obviously it's pointless as a journalist at the moment, mid-season, when the table's so tight, trying to make definitive predictions, because the club are always going to tell you that the manager's safe for now, unless it's sort of heading into that more like Lampard-style territory where you get a few more whispers. And then, of course, they lose 5 straight games, you'll get a completely different narrative. So we do genuinely just have to wait and see. But I personally haven't heard anything that sort of says Marsch has to win the next game, or Marsch has got 3 games to get 6 points from, otherwise in big, big trouble. And I certainly haven't heard anything yet that they're drawing up any kind of backup shortlists.
Great stuff, great stuff. And with that, it is half-time in the City versus Spurs game, and City are getting beat 2-0. So what I will let you do, Ben, is just hop off there. Now, everyone, make sure you follow Ben on Twitter at JacobsBen, Transfer Supremo. Ben, thanks again for coming on, and I will let you drop out now because I know you're a busy man, mate.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Good luck to Leeds for the second half of the season, and we'll speak soon. All the best.
Thank you, mate. Bye. There we go. There was the brilliant Ben Jacobs with us there. Lots of information to go through, lots to dissect. I've seen the scores coming in as well. I have got Tottenham versus City on. I can't believe it's 2-0, right? Wow. What's going on with Man City? It's a madness. It's a madness. Yeah. Personally, I really enjoyed Ben Jacobs' jumper. So sign buffs. Yeah, loads of information in there. Really, really good journalist. Knows his stuff. That's why I wanted to get him on. And as he says, we'll speak again. So hopefully we'll get him on towards the end of the window as well. D says Jesse is here for life. I think it looks that way as anyway, doesn't it, to be honest? And yeah, it was interesting hearing on the players, Nicolo Zaniolo, Hjulmand, etc. I think the one for me is mainly Azzedine Ounahi. That's the one. But like I say, that probably will develop later on. The worry with that is obviously, like he said, if Leeds United wait, then other parties may enter, and that's the risk you run when doing transfers, right? That was really informative for me personally as well. I got a lot out of that, so I'm really grateful for Ben coming. People have been asking about certain players and certain things that we've already touched on as well, so I implore you to go back and watch it. We touched on Qatari investment, we touched on 49ers investment, Azzedine Ounahi, Hjulmand, and of course others as well, Brereton Diaz, etc. So for those that have come in late that were asking me, I could see it in the chat. I knew Ben had to shoot off. He's got some stuff to do now. He's a very busy guy. I just so you know, we have touched on the players that have been mentioned in the chat. You'll just have to go back to the start to watch that. But listen, I want to thank you all for supporting the channel. We will be back tomorrow. Link is Twitter. I will do just that for you now. Just bear with me 1 second. I'll tell you what I will do. I'll put that in the description to this video. Just bear with me 1 second while I get that done for you. And then you can all go over and get him on Twitter if you haven't already. But like I say, he's got his ears close to the ground. There you go. That's in the description now. So if you need to go and go check it, then please do. People were putting me off in the chat. I can't lie to you when you were saying it's almost the teacher and student vibe. And I am very tired. And I was listening though. This is what I mean. You don't normally get serious, Joe. I was like this, taking it all in. Because there was a lot of information there that I got from it. So thank you all for watching. Please smash a like on the video on the way out. Subscribe to the channel, comments in notification bell. Tomorrow, if we've nothing on during the day, I will do a FIFA stream as well. I almost want to do one tonight, but we move. I'm going to watch the second half of City versus Tottenham. But yeah, we're in a relegation dogfight on the FIFA stream. 5 games in, we're in a relegation dogfight, having spent about 100 million. It's not looking good. But we move. Listen, smash a like. Thanks for supporting the channel. I was dying to do the BBC thing, but I better not. I was like, I can't. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit. I'm tired. I need to go to bed early, folks. Otherwise, I would have done another FIFA stream, but I am really, really tired. So we'll do one tomorrow. I need to rest and recuperate. Thanks as always for watching. Smash a like, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace out now. Leeds. I've pressed the wrong